If you've read a fair amount of Python code, then you've probably seen this init.py file pop up quite a few times. It's especially common in larger Python projects. Well, in today's video, I'm going to break down exactly what this file is, when you should use it, and exactly how it works, so stay tuned. So first things first, I've actually just removed that file, and I'm going to explain to you something that's a prerequisite, which is known as Python modules. Now, a Python module is really just some Python code or a Python file that contains code that you'll import from another module. Now, technically, any Python file is a module, but we refer to something as a module usually when we're importing it from another script. So for example, I have my string-util module, I have my math-util module, and we could imagine that this contains some code that we might want to use in a larger program. So maybe what I have is something like a main.py file, and from main.py, I want to import some of this code just to make my file a little bit cleaner, right? So I can say something like from string-util, import capitalize, and from math-util, import add. And now I have access to these functions from my utilities, and I can use them directly in my file. If I run the code, you see that I don't get any errors, and this is perfectly fine. So this is quite common, and it's a great way to organize your scripts to make things easier to read and understand, where you don't have all of your logic in a single file. And you can imagine as the project gets larger and larger, you're going to have more and more modules, and what's going to come is the need for a package. Now, a package is simply a directory that contains Python modules. So I can do something like utils here, and then I'm going to take my two utilities and put them inside of this newly created package. Now again, a package is just a directory that contains Python scripts or Python modules, and previously in older versions of Python, you needed to create this __init__.py file in order to mark that this directory was a package. But in newer versions of Python, like all of the modern ones you're using today, that's no longer necessary, and any directory that contains Python scripts is able to be considered a package. Okay, so all of that's great. But now if we go to main.py, notice that our imports are no longer working. It's saying we can't resolve the string-util and the math-util. And that's because they're inside of this package. So now if I wanted to import these various functions, I would need to change this to reference the package. So I would have to say from utils.string-util import capitalize, from utils.math-util import add, and all of that's fine. And if I run the code now, you can see that all of this works. And by the way, if you're wondering why these PyCache things keep popping up, anytime you import a module from a script in Python, it will automatically be cached inside of PyCache, so you don't need to keep recompiling all of these module scripts, especially because a lot of times they're not changing. Don't worry too much about that, but just a fun fact in case you were interested in that. Okay. So now that we've got all of this, it's time to finally talk about init.py. So I'm going to go ahead and create this file, __init__.py, which is used inside of a Python package. Now, even though it's not necessary, it's still often used because of its role. Now, what the init.py file does is simply initialize the package by running some code whenever it's imported. Super quick pause here. I want to share with you something that's super valuable and completely free, and that is my coding newsletter. In the coding newsletter, I send you coding challenges, obviously the solutions to those challenges, cool project ideas, stories, insights from me as a software engineer with over 10 years of experience. And as a lead magnet for this, I'll even send you an entire 14-page PDF breaking down all of the ways that you can make money from coding, which you can see right here. That's completely free. You can sign up from the link in the description or techwithtim.net/newsletter. And quickly, if any of you guys are interested in some private mentorship from me, I do have a program. It's called DevLaunch. I've just opened a few more slots. If you want access, you can apply and see if you're a good fit from the link in the description. Just ask you to fill out a short form just to make sure that I can actually help you. And there's a video here that shares some great insights. Anyways, thanks for listening. Now let's go back to the video. So to see the simplest example of this, I'm just going to make a print, and I'm going to say imported utils like that. And I'm going to go back to my main.py file and show you what happens in the terminal when I run this. Notice when I do that it says imported utils. And notice that it only says that one time. So again, what the init.py file does is it will run some code to initialize the package the first time this package is imported. So here it's imported twice, right? Because we're importing the string-util and the math-util, both from the utils package. So the first time that we import this package and we initialize it, we run this init.py file. That's the use case. So if you were importing a larger package, so imagine importing something like TensorFlow, you would probably have some code that you'd want to run before that import is successful. And that's why sometimes when you import code, it takes a second before it actually loads in your script. Well, there's other reasons as well, because usually it's running some kind of setup operation. So you can imagine that if you're writing a Python package, you would utilize this file to run some kind of setup or config before the package is fully ready or loaded, and then it can be used by your Python script. Awesome. Now, as well as just doing something like, printing some message or initializing something, you can simplify the imports of different components or dependencies in your package with this init.py file. So right now, if we look at main.py, the imports can be a little bit annoying and kind of weird to have to write out, and you'd have to know to use the string-util and math-util library, or module, sorry, in order to find, capitalize, and add. If you just wanted these functions to be available by default, then inside of your init.py file, you can actually write them out. So I can say from, and then I'm going to say math-util, import add, and I can say from string-util, like this, import, and then I'm going to import capitalize. And then from my main.py file, I would be able to just directly import these from util. So I could say from utils, import, add, and capitalize. That's because they're defined directly in the init.py, and anything that's defined in the init.py, even something like a variable, for example, like color, can be directly imported when you import the package. So here I can now import add, capitalize, and color. So let's run the code, and I'm going to show you actually an error that pops up and how we can fix it. So notice that when I run this, we actually get an error, and this is very common. I cannot tell you how many times this has happened to me and people that I know. It says module not found error, no module named math utility. Now that's a little bit weird. Why didn't that work? Previously, when I wrote that import inside of main.py, everything was working fine, but now when it's in init.py, it's not working. Well, the reason it's not working is because we've ran this package from outside of the package. We have this main.py file. This is the entry point to our script. Now, when this entry point runs init.py, by default, Python's going to be looking in the directory where our entry point file was for these modules, math-util and string-util. So it's going to be looking outside of the utils package. We need to tell Python to look inside of utils to find this code, and in order to do that, we need to use a relative import. We can also use an absolute import, but typically use a relative import. Now, a relative import is simply this single dot, or actually it can be multiple dots, but the single dot references that you're looking in the current package. So if I say from .mathUtility, that means from the utils math utility module, because we can have modules that have the same name that live in different directories or packages, right? Same thing with string util means look in the current package, which in this case is utils, for this string util module, and then import capitalize. So now if I go ahead and run my code, you'll see that this works fine and it prints out imported utils. However, I'm going to throw a spin on this again. What if I now go into init.py and I directly execute the init.py file? Well, when I run this, notice now that we get an error, and it says attempted relative import with no known parent package. The reason we now get this error is because we're trying to import this .math utility and .string utility, but we're not currently inside of a package. The reason we're not currently inside of a package is because we've ran init.py directly. And it just sees that it has these Python scripts beside it. It doesn't see any directories that it's currently inside of, and it doesn't know that it currently belongs to a package. It would only be able to reference packages if we had a directory inside of this directory or alongside the init.py. So this is why things get a little bit confusing. Depending on where you run the code, the import is going to work differently. Okay? So I'm hoping this is making a little bit of sense. When I run main.py, it imports this package. So then when we run the imports here, we have to use relative imports because they're inside of the package. Whereas when we run init.py, which is not usually designed to be ran, what happens is it doesn't know we're inside of a package, so it doesn't know where to look for these modules, and then we get this error saying we can't do a relative import if we don't know what the name of the parent package is. So there are ways to fix this, but it involves changing the imports based on how the Python code is executed, where you can use something like the is if __name equal to __main convention. We're going to talk about that in a different YouTube video, so stay tuned. But the point is, you need to know how you're executing this code and where the entry point is, because that's going to define how these imports work. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm quickly going to set up a more advanced example with multiple packages that are nested inside of each other, and you can see some more advanced import patterns, and then that will wrap up the video. So I've updated our Python code now to include a few nested packages. You can see that rather than just having utils, I've now defined an mutil and an sutil package inside of this package. So now I've adjusted the imports inside of my init.py to utilize these nested packages, and you can see that if I want to import the add function, I now need to say from.mutil.mathUtil import add, right? So I'm kind of walking through the package structure to know what it is that I'm importing. Now, the question that I want to pose to you, and that I'll answer obviously, is that from this math utility file, if I wanted to import something like the general util function from my general file, how would I go about doing that? Well, this is exactly where I can use an absolute import or a relative import that looks up a directory level, So from mathUtil, if I want to import this general util function, what I can do is the following. I can say import, or I can say actually, from ... and then I'm going to say general import and then general util. Now this is a relative import, and I'm looking 2 levels up, or 1 level up, the parent directory or the parent package. So rather than looking inside of mutil, which is my current package, I'm looking inside of the utils package, which is its parent package, where I then find the general module and I import general util. So if I run my code now from main.py, you can see that I don't get any errors and everything is completely fine. Now, a slightly different thing, let's say from my string util, I want to import my mathUtil.py, which is in the same level, but in a different package. Now it gets a little bit more complicated, but what I can do is say something like from, and I'm going to look in the parent package. So I'm going to say from ... right? This is going to look in parent. Then I'm going to look in the m_util package. Then I'm going to look inside of, what do we want? The mathUtil, and I'm going to import add, okay? So if I want to import from a package that's at the same level, I say, okay, I want to go up to my parent package, which is utils. Inside of utils, I know I have the mutil package, and then inside of mutil, I have mathUtil. I should have named this something better, and then I can import add. And then same thing, if I go back to main.py and I run this, notice we don't get any errors and the imports work properly. Okay. So that's it for this video. I wanted to cover all of the advanced importing and how you use Python packages with init.py. If you found this helpful, make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and I will see you in the next one.